now or yeah, okay. Yes, hello. My name is Olga and I'm located in Sweden, in Gothenburg. I'm a lecturer. I'm a gender studies scholar, and yeah, I've been working on the issues of solidarity in conversation with Kathy for some time, because my previous research was about like, together with my colleagues, we were working on feminist and LGBTI plus activism in Russia, Turkey, and Scandinavian countries in the transnational perspective. And this is how we started thinking about what solidarity means in these times. And now with the war, it became even more acute to think of this, how it is possible, whether it is possible, whether it is desirable, and how we can proceed. Yeah. And I'm happy to be part of this series and of these first conversations that we will have today. So it's, as you may have seen, we decided to have it like as a series of dialogues or conversations, and yeah, which I think is also, we will talk about this with Kathy, but dialogue is an important part of the feminist ethos of solidarity. So probably this was on the background of our thinking about this series.
Polly, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, for the third time. I'm so, my head just pops up and then I introduce myself again in various contexts. Yeah, I don't think really there's anything else that I want to say about myself, because I have a feeling that in our conversations, we're going to be getting to know one another and finding out things about one another. And I think this is as it should be necessarily at this point, especially. So, Kati.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, before we dive right into the subject for today, and before Olga and I start our little discussion, I just wanted to briefly post again the program for our series, for our discussion series. And maybe very briefly announce the next one that's happening, which is on Monday. No, sorry, Tuesday.
Oh, Tuesday, yes.
Tuesday, I get mixed up. And it's it's a discussion between Maria Majacik and Olga Blochotnik, two very renowned scholars from Ukraine, who have been talking about feminist solidarity, queer solidarity, and a Ukrainian decolonial perspective for a long while time. And now of course, as Olga already said, the question of solidarity is even more acute or important, and they agreed to share some of their thinking, their critical thinking with us on Tuesday. So I invite everybody to join their conversation, our conversation. I will not go into the detail of the program now because we're so running so late. So I encourage all of you to look at it later. We have 10 very interesting speakers, and I think all of the discussions will be very interesting and very important. And I really also hope that some of the speakers will also join the discussions of other people so that we really can get the dialogue going, as Olga already said. Because yeah, what else can we do in this time, right? Okay, so I will stop sharing my screen. So when Olga and I prepared for this session, we thought it would be interesting for the audience to know a little bit more where we are coming from and why we started our dialogue that has been going on for some years now, I would say. So maybe Olga, you already started to speak about it, but maybe you want to say a little bit more what your background is and why you are interested in this kind of queer feminist solidarity.
Yes, as I said already, like I was working on this research project about transnational activism, and where this question of solidarity is very crucial. But another thing was that I was a part of a peace building project in response to the war in Eastern Ukraine that started in 2014. And in this peace building project, there were women from Ukraine and Russia and Germany and Switzerland who met together like on a regular basis and try to build a dialogue. And what I found very peculiar in this project was that I was just a volunteer there, but I found it very peculiar that for me it was very unimaginable that people with so different ideological positions could come together and talk to each other and clarify these positions, and not to kind of, not to get too violent, I would say. And then I started reading through the feminist scholarship on solidarity. Like I was reading, for example, Bell Hooks and rereading yesterday, where Bell Hooks says that it's actually when we are similar or when we share sameness, there is no reason to build solidarity, because it's a kind of, she's very skeptical of this, but she says that we have to be confrontational, and then solidarity matters when people from very different positions can come together and work together and build something together. So this is how I got into this, because it's not, I don't like to be confrontational myself. I come from Belarus, I live in Sweden, so these are not very confrontational countries, used to be at least, like not anymore probably. Yes, but I found it, I learned from this that confrontation is not a bad thing, it's a good thing, it's a needed, it's a politically important thing.
Yeah, thank you. I agree that confrontation is extremely important, and that solidarity matters most when there is a confrontation that can be kind of like made productive. The reason why I started really looking into what it means to be in solidarity and what kind of like what we really do when we say we do solidarity was because the confrontations that happened in a solidarity project mostly led to the end of solidarity. I thought, I mean, obviously I was extremely unhappy with these occurrences of like ended solidarities, and especially in a queer feminist context, where I thought it's so important that we not only imagine these like homogenous communities, but really like also engage with difference. And I was always struck by the unableness of myself, of other people, to really deal with not because we didn't know that there are differences in opinion, in goals, in political views, but also concerning our identities. Of course, we knew they exist, but we never found ways how we could keep up our solidarity when these differences started to matter. Not surprisingly, one of the moments where the solidarity broke was exactly in a moment when Russian feminists, queer feminists, and Ukrainian queer feminists, with a lot of other people from the post-Soviet context and post-socialist context, came together in Vienna, and we had a good time for a couple of days. But then all of a sudden, differences occurred, and then it was the end of the solidarity. And it wasn't even a drama or something like major, but it was this like this inability to talk about difference in opinions, and it was difference in opinions about like how national pride is seen. So some of the Ukrainians were very proud of their nation and had a very strong patriotic view, which is very understandable. But some other people had a very like anti-national view, right? And so they were more on the no nations, no border side of things, which is also very understandable. But these two positions never managed to talk to each other or talk with each other. And although they wanted to build coalitions for to create circles where solidarity could help people in all the contexts, to queer people, especially feminist people, to improve their lives, they could not overcome those differences. Because they didn't even find a way, we didn't even find a way to really talk about it in a way so that solidarity could proceed or get the real foundation so it can live on. So yeah, that was the context, and this happened in 2014, and it has kind of like followed me over the last years, and I tried together with other people to find ways of thinking solidarity differently, so that we could deal with differences, that we could find a better way of building solidarity circles and communities.
Yeah, but probably we should try to define what we understand as solidarity. And when I was writing about solidarity in my text, I was already referring to Kathy's writing, and you define solidarity as a banal and habitual act of making life together on the one hand, but then we in the book that I co-wrote with Celine and Mia, we also, but I mean, I think it's also there in your case, but we still like underline that it's not any kind, it's not just like any, let me say this, banal and habitual act of making life together, but it should be also like a politically driven act. And also, I think what we didn't discuss when we were preparing, but what I was thinking about today is also about the ethical dimension. So it should be political, but it should be also ethical. And I think it is a bit trickier because, because bad people can also be in solidarity. I mean, whom we define as bad people are like our political rivalries can also be in solidarity. So I think it's also what this solidarity is aimed at, right? And what kind of achievements or like aims it pursues, sort of. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think the most important point for me is that I want to form solidarity for a political goal. So the definition, but this is already tricky, right? Because it needs a lot of dialogue, a lot of speaking with each other, communicating to define a political goal. But I think why I insist so much on this political goal, and I will come to the banal acts in a second, but why I insist on this political goal is because often in my experience, solidarity, especially between the West and the East, which is the context that I'm working mostly in, as Olga as well, right? Is defined by, or is more charity than solidarity. So it's a form of solidarity that where people who think they're privileged, and they are also privileged in a lot of regards, want to do something good for people who they see as less privileged. And it's this, and it's always, but yeah, and it's this kind of like benevolent gesture that's also motivated by ethical concerns, by compassion, empathy, all these good things. But it's still this idea of, okay, I'm in a better position, so I can do something good for you. And this also comes very much from a Christian, I don't know, thinking about how you engage, or how you build solidarity in a way. And I think this is very problematic, because we have seen in the last years, but I mean, this is also knowledge that is much older, that this kind of solidarity is also implies a lot of hierarchies, perpetuates hierarchies, and has the big danger that the goals and what is the definition of what is good for the receiving end of the solidarity is completely defined by people with more privilege, or think who have more privilege in the West, right? And we have seen this especially since the implementation of the anti-gay or anti-homosexual propaganda law in Russia, in the queer feminist context, when Western organizations, people started to be in solidarity with people in Russia, but also in other parts of the post-Soviet sphere, that this kind of solidarity that was often happening from the West did more harm than good for the people who really were most affected by the law. So this is the context in the queer feminist circles, right? So my insistence on this goal that you define together mutually in on the same horizontally, rather than in this hierarchy, is comes from this thinking. But then even once you have defined such a goal, and you start working towards the goal, and build your solidarity towards that goal, what we realized, or what I realized in my context, was that sometimes the political goal is so far away, or so dominating, that what happens between people on the ground and in their communication gets completely lost. And what's also lost in this communication or translation is the hierarchies and the I wouldn't say discriminations, but the problematic interactions that happen. So that's why I started thinking of solidarity as a structure that doesn't only have the goal in mind towards which you work, but also has the interaction, the everyday, the ways of sustaining life in view.
Yeah.
And I think while I was thinking about it a lot in retrospect of my own experience, and trying to theorize, what I found so interesting in your work, Olga, was that you worked so closely with your examples, and you started already thinking while you were participating in your participatory observations about all of these aspects. And I was wondering if you wanted to share a little bit from this experience to make it a little bit more graspable.
This is a bit this is a bit unexpected, like it's a bit beyond the script, I would say. So that now I have to think of this. But yes, we discussed this case actually about this public, like this visibility and also this solidarity in relation to people from Chechnya, whereas some of you may know, some of you may not know, but in 2017, there was like this case revealed that there was like a physical and violent persecutions of homosexual people in Chechnya, and then there was like the huge solidarity wave around this. And this solidarity wave was very much like within this West-East dichotomy to some extent, and it was also with the involvement of many international and transnational organizations. But then like one of the cases that probably Kathy refers to was when we wrote about this. It wasn't just like one case, but there were different ways also to problematize this solidarity. And one of them actually came from a person who herself comes from the post-Soviet region, but not from Russia, but who works for a very long time for transnational organizations, and who look at this solidarity from two sides. On the one hand, she was very engaged in this rescuing operation, so to say, but on the other hand, she also found it sometimes uneasy to accept this mode in which solidarity was suggested, like this mode of visibility. And as she says in her interview, when she was asked to bring a Chechen gay to one of the prides in one of the European cities, it became for her this like a moment of a great rage and like of being upset because she felt that it was like meaning to put a person in danger for the sake of solidarity. And then another problem was that then she also realized that that this kind of Chechnya case, but also she referred to some cases from the Middle East, they were used by some international organizations for fundraising, but then the money that were raised, they were not necessarily kind of channeled to those people on behalf of whom they were raised. So this is also like this kind of problematic side of this international solidarity that we are talking here about. And then it again like refers to this some of these problems that we try to also think about. First, like this, what Kathy was talking about, this benevolence or this kind of empathetic gesture. So how it works and at whom this empathy is like, to whom it is addressed, and what kind of shared identities are at stake when we have this. Are we empathetic to everyone or only to those people with whom we feel some kind of similarities? And is it possible to be empathetic to people whom we don't have this kind of closeness identity-wise? So to say, this is one of these difficult questions, I would say. Yes, and another another problem which kind of is raised from this is this kind of west, north, south tensions, which I also think are not always so easy to just, that they shouldn't be taken for granted, because there is also a lot of written about how like this global solidarity places of global or transnational activism, that they really are very they have a lot of similarities in the like class-wise or education-wise, like people independently from where people come from, they speak the same language. I mean, not in the sense of linguistically, but also linguistically English, but they also like learn this professional language. So how you have to do things, when you have to be in solidarity with whom and why. So things like that. So that is also what we discussed. But another thing that I would like you, Kathy, to ask about, because in your definition, you talk about these mundane practices, and you explain why you think that this political goal is not always important, but you also talk about attraction and sexual desire as part of solidarity. So can you elaborate on this? Because this can be also sometimes problematic. So if our solidarity is based on attraction or sexual desires, and again, this idea of sameness can kind of persevere, right? Yeah, so.
Yeah, I think for me in my thinking, it was first of all really important to address the issue because of my own experience in queer circles in the US, in Europe, but also in post-Soviet, especially Russian-speaking circles, and in between them there was these circles were all politically motivated solidarity communities, but a lot of sexual relationships, desires, and romantic relationships happened, and there was this reluctance to talk about it, and there's a big reluctance, I think, to admit that that sometimes it's not pure empathy that makes me or other people be in solidarity with others, but it's also desires and romantic feelings. And so my argument in the text that you're referring to is not so much that it is a good thing that desires and romantic feelings are the reason for solidarity. It's from the other side, looked at it from the other side. It's that often these feelings and desires are part of why solidarity emerges or why it's sustained. And then often when those feelings go away, as they do sometimes, the solidarity also goes away. And this is, of course, a big problem, right? So for me, it was important to acknowledge that. But I think I wanted to do more than that and say that once we acknowledge these feelings and desires, maybe we can work with them. We can not only work through them, but we can appreciate them as part of what forms our communities, not to romanticize desire and sexuality and romantic feelings, but yeah, to admit and acknowledge that they are part of our life making. And I think once you have a conscious way of dealing with these things, you can, yeah, you can deal with them. You can make them, not make them productive, that would be too much to say, but yeah, acknowledge them. And yeah, that was the point. Because I mean, I want to come back to the banal acts, and I don't want to reduce them to desires and feelings, but I think it's important to, especially in queer feminist circles, it's important to acknowledge that living desires and living pleasures is such a big political part of queer feminist political movements, groups, right? That's what we are fighting for, that we are not only allowed, but that we can live these lives and these parts of our lives. Of course, our lives are so much more, but I think that's an important part. And then once we're in the political circles, we all of a sudden stop talking about how these feelings are really lived and desires are really lived, and we have them only as the political goal, but we don't acknowledge them amongst ourselves anymore. And I thought that's probably also one of the reasons why solidarity often fails, why groups break apart. Yeah.
Yeah, so Yeah, I mean, I have an idea how we should move further,
Yes.
because I think what I want, because now we talked about how we understand solidarity, but we also talked in a bit kind of here and there about three aspects of solidarity that we distinguished through our conversation, and that you can hear we already talk about these three aspects. And these are like a dialogue and feelings or affect and working together. And we will further just unpack them very shortly. And after unpacking them, we will finalize our talk. But these three aspects, I would say, they are needed simultaneously, or not simultaneously, but together. Because I have a feeling that the one is not enough without another, and and two are not enough without the third one. Yeah, probably there are more of them, but this is what we, Kathy and me, kind of discovered through our thinking about solidarity and reading each other's text and being in conversation with each other. I will probably start with dialogue, if you don't mind, Kathy, and I won't get I mean, on the one hand, it's on the surface, right? There is again, like before this talk today, but also for my current research, I was reading all classical feminist literature about dialogue, like bell hooks, but then Mahanti, and also whom I read today. Today I read Nira Yuval Davis and this notion on transversal politics. Yeah, they all talk about dialogue as a space or as a practice where people really get into confrontation and where people can clarify things, precisely as Kathy was talking about, that sometimes you work at some political goal which is not clear and you don't have an agreement actually about this goal. So this is where dialogue is needed. Then you can also think that you are very similar because of, I don't know, coming from the same country or being of the same class. But then when you start talking, you can realize that what you perceive as your similarity is actually not, or you think that you are different because of these belongings, but you are probably different for other reasons. So this is what I see from my kind of following for more than 5 years, this peace building project, is that this dialogue was very important, for this kind of clarifications, getting into conflict, but also trying to understand why you become so agitated by particular differences, why they become so problematic. And I would say that for long, exactly what you said, Kathy, also in the beginning, that you were wondering why it happened that once people realized that they have this essential differences, then the solidarity ended. I think it also has to do with time. And if you talk to activists, many would say that, I mean, even the way how the activist field is structured through this project run collaborations, it's sometimes very hard to maintain long-lasting relations, and only through these long-lasting relations you can reach this point when you are able to clarify things, and after clarifications you can start building on these and doing something together, acknowledging these differences, not undermining them and not suppressing them, but at the same time kind of working through them and together with them. Yeah, this is one of the this is how I see a dialogue as a kind of a ground to solidarity relations. But I also admit that a dialogue is not enough, which, as in the context of the war, like when language is in itself an issue, right? Which language people speak, how they define particular things or particular phenomena, which concepts they use, and so on and so forth. So a dialogue become like this logocentricity of dialogue is also to some extent a hindrance. So something else is needed. And I would say that this something else is more like affective or intimate relations, like feelings. Probably you, Kathy, want to continue with this?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that feelings and affects are always part of solidarity. It's just also, I would say it's in the nature of most groups that I know that some of these feelings and affects are acknowledged and then others not. And this is like, we talked about it a lot about empathy and pity, and these these affects and that can develop into feelings that are mostly acknowledged as reasons for solidarity, right? But these are also very fleeting, and sometimes especially empathy can, if you discover that you are not on the same page with a person that you felt empathy for, all of a sudden the empathy is gone, right? But then what do you do with your aim of solidarity, or with your political goal that you wanted to reach through solidarity? So I would, in my thinking, I try to approach affect and feelings through the concept of solidarity as working together, and I try to think not what type of affect or feeling is needed, but I try to identify what I can see there and how we can deal with it. And the way to deal with it, I use the terminology of working together, to find a phrase to explain how you can deal with all of these aspects of solidarity that come and then that are naturally there or emerge, and then sometimes lead to deeper solidarity, but often also lead to the end of solidarity. So I try to, but of course, working together and labor, I use also the term labor. It's very Marxist-oriented language, and it's not necessarily connoted or connected to solidarity and queerness and feminist thinking in that regard. But I try to use it to pin down what I mean with it. And so I try to redefine labor in a way that it's not only like producing something together, but that it's a kind of a working together, working to this for the same goals, but also working through the affects and the feelings that we have towards each other. And that means working through the positive ones, also through the positive desires, but also the negative ones. And for me, this was really important because I realized, even if I was in long-term solidarity circles and efforts, often I was frustrated. I was feeling sad. I was feeling all of these like negative things towards the people that I was in solidarity with, and I didn't want these feelings to be the reason to stop being in solidarity. But you have to do something with your negative feelings, right? Because otherwise they become overwhelming, and you will retreat and back off from the solidarity. So I try to find ways to integrate or to acknowledge these feelings as logical and as natural part of, I'm always saying natural, I don't know, I'm lacking words today. It's super hot in Vienna, so bear with me. But yeah, these negative feelings are part of solidarity, and we should see them as natural for solidarity, because they will come up in every form of solidarity. It's just a way of how we deal with them. So working through was my terminology to how we can deal with that. And I think what Olga, what your work really brings to the table is dialogue as one form, really one technical form of working through. And I think it cannot be the only one, because of course we all have bodies, we all have desires. So I think there need to be other forms of working through other than verbal, but I think verbal is the first go-to methodology to work through all of these things, right?
Mm. Yeah, but I was also wondering, because you also write about failure, like failure, because when we talk about, on the one hand, yeah, we talk about empathy, but we also problematize empathy, as feminist and queer scholars do, because for various, I mean, there is like, it turned out that there is like a developed critique of empathy in different, Carmen, from different scholarly traditions, I would say, but at the same time, yeah, so still empathy is considered as something positive mostly, because there is also one negative aspect of empathy which I don't want to go into. But then yes, and some other, like even desire, although we problematize it, or like romantic feelings or affinity and friendship, they still have these positive connotations. But then you also talked about this, like, I think what can be more productive, also with this Hooke's idea of confrontation, as need of confrontation. And also as Yuval Davis writes, like I was just again like, she writes like the dialogue between people of differential positionings, and the wider the better. So, and this is where confrontation can start. Yeah, so these are kind of their productive negative feelings, but what's about like failure in this? Because when we talk about negative feelings, we are getting close to failure very often, because very often we cannot manage this in solidarity relations. So, but you have a more productive view of failure. Can you probably add something on this?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to get in this direction already when I mentioned the negative feelings that come up in solidarity, communities or contexts, because they are often seen as failure. They are often seen as personal failure. When you don't feel empathy anymore for people you want to be empathetic with, sorry, then you feel as a personal failure, but also when you don't reach your political goal, or when the dialogue breaks, right? You're not able to keep it up, then you also feel that your solidarity has failed. And I think I wanted to find a concept of solidarity that can include those failures as necessary part that we can also appreciate and that we can also learn from, and not saying like, oh, okay, we have to invent the wheel again because this kind of solidarity doesn't work. Just but take a different perspective and saying like, okay, failure is part of every solidarity project, especially when it comes to queer feminist solidarity that works against often states, institutions, really powerful entities. So yeah, to be honest, it's really hard. It's not only, it's personally hard, it's emotionally hard. But yeah, I kind of like refuse to not see something like productive in failures, because I think it's also a question of like how we learn to fail. I think we are so always have to succeed, and we have to always be better and smarter. And I think yeah, it would be really good to change the perspective and say like, okay, maybe we have to fail better and be better in failing. But I wanted to ask you something, because in your book, you also talk about kind of failures that have to do with empathy, and but also with acts of solidarity that are not appreciated or rejected. And I think, I mean, speaking from my own experience, this is extremely hard to accept, and often also leads to the end of solidarity. Yeah, and I was, but you frame it in a kind of like a more productive way in your theory, and or in your theorizing, and I was wondering if you wanted to say more about yeah, the moral and ethical aspect of that.
Yeah, I was thinking about a bit in a different, not the moral ethical, but more about that what I was thinking about this failure. When I read your text, I was thinking, okay, how can it be? Like, but then I actually saw that some of these failures, when, like in this dialogue project that I followed, when people didn't manage, when organizers like failed sometimes to be sensitive enough to some of the contestations, and then it led sometimes to the rupture, like when people felt so agitated and so angry. But then, to my surprise, one of these occasions I thought that it was the end, but then to my surprise, when I interviewed people, some of them were like thinking of this particular situation as a great success, because they thought, because they said that this brought such a strong feelings, again speaking of affect, that we started talking seriously, like we kind of, instead of hiding behind our positions, we started talking seriously. So they were like moved to such an extent. And this, I think, is also like this affective dissonance that we are also discussing, and that Claire Hemmings puts into words, like, right, how you achieve this state of affective dissonance. And sometimes it can be very cruel. And I'm not even sure whether feminist and queer spaces are always, because there is, there are always also this kind of idea of care, and that we have to proceed carefully and so on. But then, yeah, sometimes you can see that care can also imply the downplaying of like problems that exist, or differences or disagreements, while this kind of dissonance can lead to a serious conversation about, or like make this visible. Yeah, but I think that probably we should kind of try to wrap up and open the floor for questions. So would you like to proceed with wrapping up, Kathy? Or you had another question?
I wouldn't even like wrap up necessarily. I would just ask the audience if they have questions to what we said, or if they have other ideas, aspects that we didn't mention or didn't think of that they wanted to talk about. Yeah, so any questions are very,
yeah, we also
welcome.
we also have one in chat.
Should we start with that one?
Yeah, we can.
Do you want?
I mean, probably Adnan, if I pronounce the name correctly. I hope if you want to say like, or we can read it as well, but if you want to engage verbally, then you are also welcome to do this. But it's, of course, you don't have to. Yeah, but if I understand, the way how I understand it is that if you don't talk about these things, they will still hunt you. And if I understand it correctly, and then it is probably yeah, it is probably precisely what we talk about, this dissonance. So that sometimes you do need this rupture, you need this failure in order to, yeah, kind of to overcome some deadlock or to stimulate the like meaningful conversation.
Mm-hmm. I think so as well. And I think what we like, just to add a little nuance, I think it's hurtful. And I think, but I think that this is part of the necessary labor, right? Because we all understand, or maybe this is another aspect that we could talk about it. Solidarity is often seen like charity as this like graceful act, this like Christian act or good act, but in reality it's always the person who gives solidarity who also really benefits from it, right? It's not only the person who is seemingly the receiving end. So that is, and that's also why I think thinking of solidarity as shared labor is so important, because everybody involved benefits from solidarity, or should benefit from solidarity. And but then on the other hand, like when ruptures emerge, they're so painful, and it's also a question of like acknowledging that and trying to work through the pain in a way that's important. Yeah. I think there's a question.
Yeah, we have a question from Michelle, if I say correctly.
Yes. Well, thank you for your conversation. It was super interesting. I was wondering, it's half question, half thought, that how do we change our, as a person coming from a more privileged background, I guess, from a more Western, how do we change solidarity practices so that they would decenter those Christian narratives that are so permeating in the Western society? Because, for example, I'm not religious, but I realize that a lot of my thinking is based on like how philosophy and just in general culture has been shaped by Christianity. And really, really curious, maybe we could center like practices of solidarity from more Eastern or Southern countries. Are there any examples of that?
Yes, but I want to say that, for example, when Kathy talks about this solidarity as this benevolence, I don't necessarily like feel like that, because I think it is exactly depends on what context you talk from, like, or what is your positionality, and this is probably those examples that you see most. But I think there are also many of these solidarity gestures which come from the position of not being a privileged subject and not necessarily being like a Western subject. And when people like also on this very sometimes, because solidarity is not only about like sharing resources, right? It can be, and I mean I don't have like a particular example in mind, but my colleagues here in Sweden who have the kind of origin in Latin America, they would, of course, they conceptualize a lot that there are many like of this political organizing like outside of the state that has to do with like more like grassroots, genuine relations. Of course, there are the same tensions there. Yeah, then I think like I'm thinking of Tanya, who is probably here, Tanya Shurko, but I don't know whether, but this like Southeast solidarities or South-South solidarities, something that is also discussed. I don't want to essentialize these positions as well, because as I said, like there is also a lot of this critique, how these positions are maintained and how what is considered as to be like genuine global south is in fact like very much related to the global north. So there are like a lot of tensions here as well, but still, I mean, not all. Yeah, I think we can. And in the book, for example, we discuss like this relations of Sami people who still like in Norway, who still use like Christian ethos, but also on a more indigenous spirit, let's say, like to build solidarity relations in the Norwegian North with also with the majority population.
Yeah, thanks, Olga.
Thank you.
I was also wondering if other, because I see some of our speakers, for example, Anna and Sultan, that maybe you also want to say something. I just thought of currently a lot of indigenous people and groups in Russia are in great solidarity, or in articulate a lot of solidarity with people in Ukraine, and often these minorities are themselves extremely oppressed. And I think here we cannot easily speak of great privilege, right? It's more, it's different different positionalities, but still joining in one joining in the struggle. And I find this very inspiring. Yeah, Anna and Sarta don't want to say anything. They will speak in a week. So you don't have to. Hi, Sarta. Yeah, John asked me to encourage everybody to turn on the cameras, although he has not turned on his camera, I have to say. But yeah, we're very happy to see your faces if you can.
Yeah, I'm also dying from the heat, and yeah, didn't want to turn off my camera, but okay, you will see me maybe in a more glorious version next week.
Where are you? Where are you?
In Berlin.
Okay.
It's not as hot as in Vienna, as I remember, but it's still unbearable. Yeah, these days. Thank you for this very, very interesting talk. It was really inspiring to hear it, and also like in terms of recent events, it's I think important to sometimes to take the step out of the heat and to theorize a bit, so to speak. So I think this theoretical level brings a lot of and I think maybe this can be also a way to overcome the heat of the emotion and affect and this I don't know, desires. And I thought I have one question. What do you think, like, a role of compromise in this solidarity work? I mean, when the rupture occurs, as you say, and also within now the circles I'm in connection to the war and like militarization, and how can we now be anti-militarist, queer feminists, but how cannot we not support like the what is happening, and so we need to compromise, and like on what expense, and maybe you can give us thoughts about this a bit. Yeah, thank you.
Can I start?
Yes,
Kasi, is it fine? I was like, thank you, Saltanat, for this comment. First, what I was thinking about this theory is the possibility to overcome like this very like affective stage at which we live at the moment, but at the same time, it's also, we can also consider it as a way to hide, right? Because it's very easy, like to, you know, it's I think it's very ambiguous, so we should be aware of this. It's not necessarily a good thing to theorize, but yeah, and with the compromise, I think, again, I mean, if you look at, because Yuval Davis, I mean, and also Cynthia Cockburn, they wrote a lot about military conflicts, and they talk about this, that sometimes, you know, with like your political position, you just need to probably step down a bit and to see what people, like what people who are under attack, they talk about like colonial struggles and so on, what they think, what they say. Yeah, no, it's also like this idea of transversal politics. It's about like there's these two dimensions, like routine, when you have your identity and your position, but also shifting when you have a space to change or reconsider your position. And it doesn't mean that you have to shift rapidly from anti-militarist to militarist, but sometimes probably you can take time to think, okay, probably my position should be calibrated in this situation, in this particular situation. I don't say that I talk about this, but these are questions that I ask myself, and this is how I reply to them. Probably it's there is no need to rush into, you know, like manifesting your position, but it probably you can take some time and think whether your position is still suitable to the times we live in. Yeah, something like that. It's again, it's a bit of theoretization, which, as I say, can be a tricky thing, but yeah.
And I would add that, I mean, Olga, you emphasize dialogue so much. I think dialogue is extremely important in that regard. And this, but also this view that all of you together should benefit from the solidarity, because I think if you have two different opinions, then you can either play it in a way where one wins in the end. But I think in this concept of like really working together and trying to find the common goal, each position has to move in a way. And I mean, of course, this is only in theory, and I'm not even like trying to apply it to the situation right now. But yeah, but I think this, there needs to be a great willingness to take steps on all the sides towards a common goal. Yeah, but we have a...
Sorry, Kathy. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that Lyubov is already raising the hand for a long time. Yeah. But if you wanted to ad hoc say something too.
Yeah, I'm very briefly say that I do have example of this, like how in dialogue precisely about militarism and anti-militarism, like this also there was like this between a German participant of a dialogue and the Ukrainian one, and how this German participant then acknowledged that she also had to change a bit her stance, her very like, and it was before this this current full-scale invasion. So this discussion was already there for some time. Yes, Lyubov, go ahead.
Thank you so much for this very interesting and frankly practical discussion. And my question is regarding solidarity as a means to an end. So at what point should we think that solidarity is not the main goal? When solidarity becomes the problem. So what I mean is, when two groups are working together and one group is more privileged than the other, and the privileged group wants really to help the less privileged group, but the less privileged group feels unsafe working with the privileged group. When the privileged group has the obligation to step down, stop the dialogue, and just let people be safe on the one hand, and on the other hand, can it be the problem then? So when you just don't do nothing, it's really easy to say that I don't have to do anything because I'm not asked to do something. And on the one hand, on the other hand, it can be a problem when people are excluded on wrong basis, not because they are unsafe to be with, but maybe some xenophobic or other concerns. That's it, sorry.
Yeah, it's I mean, this is how people say 1 million question. I mean, if I knew this response, I would yeah, I would be happy. But yeah, Kathy, you were talking a lot about this kind of privilege, and because I can just very shortly say that also why empathy is so much problematized is precisely because it has this kind of dimension of unequal power relations, and then that it's hard for those with whom we empathize to kind of decline this, because then we have these hurt feelings, like, right, this white fragility that you're writing about, Cassie. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, thank you, Luba, for these questions. I think they're extremely important. And of course, I don't have a blueprint answer that I could give, but what I experienced often is that in the cases where one privileged group thinks that they want to be in solidarity so badly with another group, and the other group says like, oh, we don't want your solidarity, what is really at stake is who gets to define what the disprivileged or non-privileged group needs, right? So the problem is often not that the group doesn't want the privileged people's solidarity, but they want what they want, right? They want not what the privileged group define as what is good for them. And I think that's in my experience very often a problem in so many different contexts, right? That, I mean, it even starts with, I don't know, when I was in Flinter groups, in female identified people only groups, and then there were some cis men who really wanted to be in solidarity with the Flinter people and wanted to join the group, and the group was like, yeah, maybe this is not the kind of solidarity that we want. Maybe it would be more solidarity for us and the right solidarity if you stayed out for this time, right? Because we need to be right now in these groups. It's a banal example, right? But I think it shows so clearly that the kind of solidarity that the cis men wanted to contribute or to do was not what the Flinter people needed or wanted. So I would think if it's really a working together, it would be on the cis-men side to say like, okay, what do you want? And then to say like, okay, can I do this? Yes, of course I can. I can leave you in your groups alone, right? To be safer, for example, because you said safer spaces. So that's why I thought about it. Yeah, I think this is transferable to a lot of contexts, and even like on the highest level of development context, this is often the case that Western institutions define how, like, what the goal of the solidarity is that they wanna yeah, follow or want to contribute, or however you call it, and then people in the global south, for example, say, well, this is not what we need. Yeah, I don't know, it's not really a good answer to all of the questions, but I think it's always worth stepping back and thinking like, okay, what is really at stake? Is there really this that people don't want solidarity, or is what I think is solidarity is not really the solidarity that it's needed or wanted, and that we have to think differently about the goals?
We also have this discussion in the chat about these new developments in the US in relation to, how would you put it in English language, like correctly? Well, yeah, but you know that the right for abortion was cancelled. Is it correct to say so, or probably it's not 100% correct, but yeah, legally, yeah, but yes. And then what's about this solidarity? And then we have a comment, a reply to this that wait, I don't know, Nina, if you want to say like what is your take on this, or do you want us just to read it?
I'm a bit ill at the moment, so maybe just read it.
Okay, good, no problems. Take care. Specifically, but yeah, because I'm not that states respond to what happened in the states, like
yeah, I can a bit elaborate about that. Like what I was most struck with was that it's not just different communities that are affected from different states are discussing. It's also that there is a whole response from a government. So it's like this supra-segmental thing, you know, like it's not just people who are affected, it's an actual governmental stance that we do not, we condemn what's happened in the US and we're going to do something different. And sometimes, I mean, I've been seeing this form of solidarity for years, like for example, when in New Zealand or in Australia, there were different laws about maternity and paternity leaves for in case of abortions as well as miscarriages and so on. And there was like a small wave where different governments would take the steps. And this is like, for me, is the most interesting form of solidarity because I haven't seen it that much. So I'm always sort of tabs on it.
Yeah, but can we, yeah, it's a bit, it's like a bit, yes, it's indeed a very different form of solidarity, like very like top down to some extent. Yeah, I didn't follow these developments, but yes, it's indeed, it's actually interesting to think about this, because I think this is what is very often discussed in discussion about fema and homonationalism, of course, is how particular states choose the agenda for their solidarity actions. So I would say it in this direction. But with the abortion rights, for example, another, what I recalled, because there was this question about like Western and privileged solidarity, but when this in Poland, this Black protest started in, I think it was in 2016, then it didn't come from the global West or North, it came from Eastern Europe, but then it was actually very much it became very transnational, and also like people from the global South were very like showing like a lot of solidarity to what was happening in Poland. So I think it's also this good example of how it can go like beyond this kind of Western benevolent solidarity action. We can also think about how digital technologies kind of maintain or make some solidarity relations more like more possible, like more available than it was previously.
Yeah, I think what is always important is to understand or try to understand what's behind the solidarity of big institutions or even states and nations. I mean, Olga, you mentioned homonationalism, which is my kind of like field where I have thought a lot about it, because Austria is not a very homophile or homo-friendly place, right? But when the Russian anti-gay propaganda law was implemented in Russia, all of a sudden the state of Austria was speaking in solidarity with all the poor gays and lesbians in Russia, right? And that made me think, like, why are they doing this? It cannot be because they're genuinely caring for the rights of gays and lesbians. There is something else at stake. Yeah, it's just one question, right, or one example, but I think in the case of states, there's always more at stake than the goodness of people. But it's not necessarily always a bad thing, right? I mean,
yeah, but then also